Welcome back, players. I'm Jack with 360 Cancel, and this is Coco the Weiss Cat. And a new ban list just dropped, boys. Let's go. Actually, it's 2 new deck restrictions, which means that in official tournaments, you can only have one of the cards specified by these lists in any one deck. A few days ago, the English Weiss Schwarz Twitter teased this image, so it was clear that a choose one of 3 and a choose one of 2 will be coming. Players speculated heavily on what would get the axe, but the leading contenders were Standby Nino, Stocksoul Escanor, and maybe something from Hololive. Lo and behold, this morning, we see that Nino and Escanor are indeed the decks that have been restricted, so let's summarize. As of April 21st, 2023, no official tournament deck may contain more than one card of these 3, Daily Routine Nino Nakano, Dozing Off Ichigo Nakano, and Important Charm. So if you have any one of these cards in your deck, you can't run the other 2. Further, no official deck may contain both Master the Tavern Escanor and Negative Little Gil Thunder. You can only run one or the other. So for those of you not terribly in the loop, and just to give some context, why are these cards restricted? Well, let's talk about Nino. 8 Standby Nino was the deck to beat for a long time. Since Quince 2 came out in August of last year, it's been dominating the field. It's very good at hitting a lot of standby triggers, putting bodies on the stage that are hard to deal with, and has a finisher that also acts as a standby trigger. It's extremely consistent, hard to fight, and has a very threatening top end. Now this deck actually received a restriction back in December where you had to pick between the Charm event and the level 0 Nino. The Charm event was an anti-soul counter, and the level 0 Nino was a discard, draw, and salvage filter, so most decks kept the Nino. However, when Worlds happened in January, and Nino won first and second after the restriction was already in place, it was clear that this wasn't enough. So this time around, Bushi is aiming at the Ichigo Brainstormer too. Now this Ichigo Brainstormer, which can brainstorm 5 and also sacrifice herself to top check 4, gives the deck a lot of speed. That means it can burn through its deck and fill up its waiting room very quickly, and refresh when it wants. This is extremely powerful for a standby deck as it puts your targets in the waiting room and lets you set up your triggers with your deck's reshuffle combo where you abuse the level 3 standby trigger. The hope, it seems, is that if you don't have access to both the level 0 filter and the Ichigo Brainstormer, that when you're moving cards around and trying to set up your deck, it loses some consistency and costs more resources. However, the Quince movie set is coming out in June, which gives the deck a lot more tools, so I have to wonder if this even matters. For now, Quince does have access to other top check filters and other Brainstormers and Akatsuki's, so while this change probably makes the deck a bit more clunky, it's still very playable and still very strong. But let's move to 7 Deadly Sins. So now you have to pick between the Gil Thunder and the level 0 Escanor. The level 0 Escanor is mandatory if you want to play the level 3 Escanor combo, which is the core of the new deck. This deck won 3rd and 4th place at Worlds only a month after the set released, so it seems to be pretty strong. And it is. Escanor's ability to turn his soul damage into burned ones makes him an incredibly threatening finisher that can kill you from level 2 if he sets up well, even if you're compressed. Apart from that, the deck has very strong Brainstormers that give it a ton of control over its own deck, an almost unlimited number of ways to plus, and a lot of cards that generally are efficient and consistent. The Gil Thunder level 3 bounced a character and top checked, letting you set up an open lane and order your triggers in a way that maximized Escanor's potential damage. He could also get extra power and soul, which did allow for some more precision side attacks. By taking Gil out of the equation, what Bushiroad is aiming for is that Escanor will have less consistent ways to open up lanes and order its triggers, thus making Escanor's effective kill range smaller and the cost to pull it off higher. Now SDS does have other ways to bounce characters and top check without Gil, but like the Ichigo Brainstormer, they're not all in one card and thus are a bit clunkier to pull off together. Shrinking Escanor's kill range also makes him far more vulnerable to memory and anti-soul counters, which make the life of an SDS player very difficult. However, like with Nino, being the deck has alternatives to work with, it will very likely adapt and still be a threat. That said, adapting SDS to this restriction isn't as easy as Nino, and we'll have to see what players come up with. And speaking of players, let's talk about the community's reaction. Now, before the announcement, players had actively been voicing the opinion that an update to the banned and restricted list was necessary. Across the board, it was pretty unanimous that Nino was still too strong. I mean, if you still had the top 2 decks at Worlds after getting restricted, clearly something's not quite right. SDS, however, was a bit more split. First off, it's a much newer set, and people haven't really optimized it or adapted to it quite yet. The builds you do see in some shop challenges and the few team leagues that have posted results do differ from each other and the World's lists in very meaningful ways. However, the deck clearly was very strong. As I watched the discourse at my locals and online, I saw more of a split opinion on whether or not SDS needed to get hit. A lot of people think that the Escanor finisher is just too stupid and don't want to fight it, and you know what, they're probably right. However, the set's still very new, and giving it a restriction so early, and with so little tournament data, seems to have struck a lot of people as premature. Now personally, I'd agree with the latter. It kinda sucks that SDS wasn't even really given a chance to perform, like the other banned and restricted titles, which were given at least one season to see whether or not they were a real problem. Further, a lot of strong decks are coming down the pipeline this summer and fall, so making the current list of top dog decks less diverse feels kind of bad. But it also makes me wonder, is this going to become a pattern? If Bushiroad releases a set they think is going to be too powerful in an upcoming season, will they just drop a restriction on it a month or two after it comes out? They're certainly not going to ban anything before the set releases. That would affect sales. But again, what about after? I definitely wouldn't like to see that become the norm, as it makes buying into any set that's deemed powerful feel kind of bad. And this isn't the first time the people said Bushiroad has put down a ban without enough forethought in English. But this is all personal to me. I really enjoy the deck, I think it's cool, and after finally finding a build that I was happy with for the Shop Challenge circuit, I'm kinda salty that I have to take it back to the drawing board, and that other strong decks aren't getting hit in a more profound way. To me, it feels way too soon. However, I know that fighting against it isn't fun, and Escanor's ability to end the game from such a wide range can really feel like a shutout. At the end of the day, I'm not a Worlds level player. I can't say for certain whether or not these were the right calls to make, if any were correct at all. I really don't think anyone can. All this means for us is that for Nino and SDS players, it's time to go back to brewing, and for players of other sets, you might get more of a chance to shine with these two giants taking some hits. Only time and results will tell how these decks adapt and if they stay on top, but the summer is slated to be pretty damn exciting, so how the field will shape up is anyone's guess. But no matter what you're playing, I hope you have a lot of fun out there in your tournaments, and I hope this restriction does end up making the game healthier and more fun to play for everyone. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.